Under the soft morning light of Riverside City, a single mother named Nora Hayes clutches her 3-year-old son, Eli, outside a crumbling red brick house, her so-called $1 inheritance. The family that once mocked her drives away in their luxury cars, leaving her with nothing but a broken roof, a loyal German shepherd named Rex, and a faith she refuses to lose. But when night falls and thunder rolls over the harbor, the sound of metal echoes beneath the floorboards, leading Nora to a hidden chamber, lost deeds, and a secret that could change everything. From betrayal to rebirth, from a mother's tears to a city reborn in light. This is a story about courage, love, and the quiet miracles God plants beneath our pain. Before the story begins, tell me in the comments where you're watching from. And please, hit like and subscribe if you believe that even the smallest faith can move mountains, and that God still works wonders through those who refuse to give up. A gray spring rain hung over Riverside, the harbor city that smelled of rust, salt, and old dreams. The drizzle came soft at first, then grew heavier, veiling the skyline like thin mourning cloth. Nora Hayes stood at the curb with her 3-year-old son, Eli, in her arms, and a German shepherd named Rex sitting loyally by her feet. She was 29, slender but sturdy, the kind of woman shaped by long nights and harder mornings. Her wavy chestnut hair clung damply to her face, and her pale skin, once luminous, now held the quiet exhaustion of someone who had carried too much for too long. Her dark eyes, however, those stayed defiant. They held both tenderness and unspoken grief, a storm behind calm waters. Eli squirmed in her embrace, his round face framed by a mop of light brown curls. His small fingers played with the zipper of her raincoat as he murmured, "Mama, it's raining on my shoes." "I know, sweetheart," she whispered, kissing his temple. "We'll be inside soon." Across the street stood Victor Hale, her late husband's older brother. A tall man in his 40s, he wore a navy trench coat perfectly fitted to his broad shoulders. His dark hair was slicked back with precision, his face angular, clean-shaven, and proud. The lines around his mouth hinted at control rather than warmth. Victor had always looked like he belonged in boardrooms, not families. Once, he'd been charming, even kind, until the family inheritance tore them apart. Beside him stood his wife, Ava Hale, slender and sharp-edged, like the silver umbrella she twirled between manicured fingers. Her golden hair was styled in perfect curls that the rain dared not touch, thanks to the chauffeur who held a black umbrella above her like she was royalty. Her smile didn't reach her eyes. Ava's beauty was immaculate, but it carried the chill of glass. A beauty meant to be seen, not touched. Victor raised a document in one gloved hand, his voice carrying easily through the rain. "Here it is, Nora. The official deed. Congratulations. You're now the proud owner of your late husband's grand inheritance." He gestured mockingly toward the abandoned brick warehouse behind Nora, its walls streaked with rust and ivy, its windows boarded up with uneven planks. A faded sign still clung to the wall. Riverside Streetcar Company, Eston 1912. $1, Ava added sweetly, her tone dripping poison. "I'd say that's quite a bargain, wouldn't you? Perhaps you can rent it to the rats for half a cent a night." The sound of their laughter echoed down the empty street. Nora's arms tightened around Eli, who looked at her with innocent confusion. "Mama," he said softly, Is this really our house? She forced a smile, swallowing the lump in her throat. Yes, baby. It's our house. And we'll make it beautiful, you'll see. Victor's gaze hardened. You're welcome to it. Our lawyer will send you the utilities paperwork. The place hasn't been used since Grandfather bought the land in the 50s. He couldn't sell it. Some nonsense about encumbrances on the deed. He slipped the document into her hand, leaned close, and whispered, You should have stayed quiet, Nora. Some secrets in this family were never meant to surface. Then he turned sharply, guiding Ava toward their waiting black sedan. Nora stood still long after the taillights disappeared into the mist. The silence of the city pressed in, broken only by the rhythm of rain tapping against the corrugated roof. Rex gave a low whine and nudged her leg. She looked down and exhaled shakily. I know, boy, she murmured. It's just us now. The dog tilted his head as if understanding. Rex was 4 years old, his black and tan coat glistening even in the drizzle. His amber eyes were deep and alert, the eyes of a creature that had seen too much. Once a police dog in training, he had been dismissed after an injury to his shoulder. He walked with a faint limp, but carried himself with a soldier's dignity. When Nora adopted him from the shelter a year ago, he'd been wary and silent. Now, he was her shadow, guardian, friend, and the only soul she trusted completely. Eli reached down, his little hand patting Rex's head. Good boy, he giggled, and for a moment the gloom lifted. Nora took a step toward the warehouse door. The heavy padlock was already broken, hanging loosely from the latch. She hesitated before pushing it open. The rusty hinges let out a cry like an old ghost finally waking. Inside, the air was thick with dust and the faint scent of oil and time. The ceiling leaked in several places, and puddles mirrored the weak light filtering through cracked windows. A single metal desk sat against the far wall, its drawers rusted shut. Nora walked slowly, her footsteps echoing across the concrete floor. Eli's giggle bounced through the empty space as he pointed upward. Mama, it's so big, she smiled faintly. It's a start. Then Rex stiffened, his ears perked, nose twitching. He padded forward, sniffing along the floorboards until his paw tapped a loose tile. Clack. A hollow sound answered back. Nora frowned and knelt beside him. She brushed away grime and found a patch of concrete slightly raised. Different color. Different texture. Beneath the dirt, her fingers found cold metal. A steel hatch, half buried and forgotten. She tugged gently at the handle, but it wouldn't move. What is it, Mama? Eli asked. I don't know, sweetheart, she whispered, but it's something. She sat back on her heels, staring at the hidden door as the rain drummed harder above them. Somewhere beneath their feet, the old building seemed to breathe, like the heart of the city still pulsing in secret. Nora felt it deep in her bones. Whatever was buried here wasn't just old machinery or junk. It was a secret the Hale family never wanted her to find. And tonight, for the first time since her husband's death, Nora Hayes stopped feeling helpless. She felt curious. She felt awake. There was something under that floor, waiting to be found. The night wrapped the old warehouse in silence, broken only by the steady tap of rain dripping through the cracked roof. The air inside was thick and heavy, carrying the faint scent of rust and mold. Nora Hayes gripped her phone, its dim flashlight slicing through the darkness. Eli sat in his worn stroller beside the open hatch, a small blanket pulled over his knees. Rex stood alert, His ears pricked and fur slightly raised, a shadow of instinct flickering through his amber eyes. The steel hatch had groaned like a wounded creature when she'd pried it open. Now, a narrow staircase of corroded iron led downward into a blackness that seemed to breathe. Nora's heart thudded against her ribs, but curiosity, stronger than fear, pulled her forward. She slung a small backpack over her shoulder, adjusted the strap across her chest, and whispered, "Stay close, boy." Rex moved first, silent and sure, his nails clicking faintly against the steps. The descent felt endless. The deeper they went, the colder the air became, tinged with something metallic, ancient. Nora's light wavered over curved brick walls arched like a tunnel, hand-laid, meticulous, and old enough to predate the warehouse itself. At the bottom, they reached a chamber no bigger than a small apartment. Rusted rails ran along one wall, the remnants of some forgotten transport system. In the corner sat a massive iron chest, its surface patterned with age and corrosion. Nora's breath caught. She crouched, brushing off decades of dust with trembling hands. The chest bore an embossed emblem, a wheel with wings, the old insignia of the Riverside Streetcar Company. Her husband Garrett had once mentioned that his grandfather worked for that company, but she'd never known the details. Her throat tightened. "Garrett," she whispered, "what were you hiding?" The latch was fused shut with rust. She reached for the small wrench she'd carried from her car and wedged it under the clasp, straining until the metal cracked open with a screech. Inside were rolled maps tied with faded ribbons, several legal-looking folders sealed in wax, and one envelope, yellowed and delicate. The writing was unmistakably masculine, the ink smudged but legible. "If they give you the $1 house, it means they've forgotten what lies beneath. The real inheritance is buried under your feet." Her eyes blurred. The handwriting was Garrett's, his last message before the accident. Perhaps the one thing he'd meant to tell her, but never could. Nora's chest ached. She remembered his face the week before he died. Distracted, secretive, half afraid. He had said, "If anything happens to me, promise you'll take care of Eli, and promise you'll never sell the warehouse if it ever comes to you." Now the words echoed with new meaning. A faint creak above made Rex snarl low. The sound was deliberate. Footsteps. Someone was in the building. Nora's pulse spiked. She switched off the flashlight, instantly plunging them into darkness. Eli stirred, his sleepy voice whispering, "Mama?" She pressed a finger to her lips, holding him close. The footsteps grew louder, measured, heavy, and unhurried. Whoever it was knew this place. The faint outline of light from the hatch flickered as a shadow passed over it. Nora's mind raced. It could be Victor's men. She'd seen the suspicion in his eyes earlier that day, the way he'd warned her to stay quiet. Rex moved like a phantom, positioning himself between Nora and the stairs, every muscle coiled. She could feel his tension vibrating through the air. Then, from above, a man's voice, calm, low, and unfamiliar, called out, "Is someone down there?" Nora froze. The accent was local, the tone cautious but not threatening. After a pause, she answered, "Who's asking?" A flashlight beam pierced the darkness. The silhouette of a man appeared at the top of the stairs. "Name's Jonas Reed," he said. "City maintenance. We had a power complaint filed on this block. Figured I'd check the old building since it's still hooked to the grid." As he descended, the light revealed a man in his mid-30s, tall and wiry, wearing a soaked city worker's jacket. His face was tanned, marked by faint scars near the jawline, signs of someone who'd seen real work. maybe real pain. A few days' stubble shadowed his cheeks. His eyes, gray, blue, and watchful, flicked between Nora and the open chest. Rex growled softly. Jonas lifted a hand, instinctively calming. "Easy, big guy. I'm not here to cause trouble." His voice carried a quiet steadiness, the kind of tone that belonged to people who had once been broken, but learned to rebuild. Nora studied him carefully. "You're out here at midnight, checking a power line?" He gave a small shrug. "City doesn't sleep. Besides, this place is on my route. Half the transformers around here are older than me." He stepped closer, and his eyes fell on the papers spread across the chest. "You found something, didn't you?" Nora hesitated, not answering. Something in his expression told her he wasn't surprised, like he'd known this basement existed long before tonight. Then the hatch above slammed shut. Jonas whipped his flashlight upward. "That wasn't me," Rex barked, deep and fierce. Eli began to cry softly. Nora's fear returned in a rush. The footsteps, the shadow, the warning Victor had whispered. She clutched her son and whispered, "We need to get out." Jonas nodded, moving toward the stairs. But when he pushed the hatch, it wouldn't budge. It was locked from above. His jaw tightened. "Someone's sealing us in." Nora's heart pounded. "Why would anyone—" He cut her off, voice low. "Because whatever's down here, they don't want it leaving." Rex's barking echoed against the brick, and somewhere behind the walls came a sound that didn't belong. A faint hum, like machinery, waking after a century of sleep. Jonas turned, shining his flashlight toward the far corner. The beam caught an outline. A steel door hidden beneath a tangle of cables, slightly ajar, and from within came a slow, rhythmic draft. Breathing. Nora held Eli close, her whisper trembling. "What is that?" Jonas's voice was a murmur. "Something that's been waiting a long time to be found." The hum grew louder, blending with the pulse of rain above. And beneath the city of Riverside, the darkness exhaled. By morning, the rain had stopped, leaving Riverside wrapped in a silver fog that clung to the harbor cranes and the worn facades of its brick buildings. Nora stood at the window of her small apartment above a closed bakery, watching the street awaken with the hum of early commuters. The night's terror still throbbed beneath her ribs. The locked hatch, Jonas's steady voice, the strange, mechanical breathing beneath the floor. She'd escaped somehow, but the memory lingered like a bruise on her heart. A knock broke her thoughts. When she opened the door, a woman in a navy raincoat stood there, holding a worn leather briefcase. She was in her early 50s, tall, with olive skin and graying black hair pulled into a low bun. Her glasses framed sharp, intelligent eyes that softened when she smiled. "Mrs. Hayes, I'm Dr. Camila Alvarez, director of the Riverside Heritage Museum. The city archives forwarded me your name. Apparently, you've discovered something remarkable beneath that warehouse of yours." Her tone was warm yet professional, the kind used by people who've spent years navigating skepticism. Nora, still wary from the night before, stepped aside. "Please, come in." Camila moved with the quiet assurance of someone accustomed to preserving history piece by piece. Her clothes smelled faintly of old books and citrus soap. As she laid out papers on the table, Nora noticed a faint scar running down her left wrist, perhaps a relic from her days in excavation work. "Before I became a museum director," Camila said, as if reading her thoughts, "I was an archaeologist. I used to dig for truth in dirt. Now I do it through bureaucracy." Nora almost smiled. Well, you might be digging through both today. They spread the documents from the iron chest across the kitchen table. Yellowed deeds, maps, and contracts, each stamped with the long-defunct Riverside Streetcar Company's emblem. Camila adjusted her glasses and studied a wax seal with reverent care. This seal is pre-Depression era. Authenticity like this is rare. If the lineage connects to your late husband's family, this could change city property law as we know it. Eli sat cross-legged on the floor with Rex beside him, pushing toy cars in a circle. The dog watched quietly, every sense on alert even in peace. The deep scar on Rex's shoulder caught the morning light, a mark from his years as a service dog. His loyalty to the child was absolute. Where Eli went, Rex followed like a silent guardian. When Camila finished examining the final document, she looked up, her expression shifting from curiosity to wonder. Nora, these papers aren't just deeds. They reference a founder's trust, a reserve fund created when the streetcar company closed in the 1940s. It's been dormant ever since, accruing interest. If these documents are valid, your family might be entitled to every cent of it. Nora's throat tightened. How much are we talking? About? Camila hesitated, then replied, potentially millions. Eli looked up, eyes wide. Mama, we're rich? Nora laughed softly, brushing his hair back. Not yet, sweetheart. First we have to make sure it's real. The museum director's smile faded slightly. And make sure you're safe. Discoveries like this attract attention, the kind you don't want. Those words had barely settled when Nora's phone buzzed. A new message, unknown number. You're trespassing on graves you don't understand. Leave the documents where they belong, or lose what you love most. Her hands trembled. Camila's gaze sharpened. What is it? Nora showed her the screen. Camila's brow furrowed. Anonymous threats are common in disputes over inheritance, but this feels different. Personal. She picked up her phone. We'll keep this quiet until we can authenticate everything properly. I'll contact someone I trust. That someone arrived 2 hours later, a man named Detective Samuel Grant. He was in his early 40s, stocky and broad-shouldered, his sandy beard streaked with gray. The lines around his eyes suggested long years of disappointment balanced by an enduring sense of duty. His brown coat hung loose, revealing a shoulder holster and a badge clipped near his heart. Dr. Alvarez tells me you've stumbled into something that's making the wrong people nervous, he said. Samuel had a calm but weathered demeanor, the kind of man who'd seen too many midnight calls and empty promises. His voice was low, almost weary but kind. I lost a partner in a case like this once, he admitted while setting his coffee down. Inheritance fraud turned into something uglier, so I don't ignore warnings. Rex sniffed the detective's boots, then sat, satisfied. Good sign, Nora murmured. Grant gave a half smile. Dogs always know who's honest. That's why I like working with them better than people. They talked through the afternoon, tracing the possible origins of the threat. Grant suspected that Victor and Ava Hale, the same relatives who mocked her inheritance, had been tipped off by someone inside city records. If they're trying to scare you off, it means this trust fund is real, he said, and someone's been enjoying its profits for a long time. Camila nodded grimly. The fund may have been mismanaged, siphoned, or even hidden in shell accounts. We'll need the court to unseal the historical trust once we confirm the documents. As dusk fell, Nora walked them to the door. The sky above the harbor burned orange, fading into purple haze. Grant paused before leaving. I'll have patrol cars pass by tonight. Keep your lights low, curtains drawn. And if you hear anything strange, don't investigate alone. When the door closed, silence returned, until Rex suddenly lifted his head, growling toward the window. Nora followed his gaze. Across the street, parked beneath a flickering street lamp, was a black sedan. The same model Victor drove. Inside, the silhouette of a man sat perfectly still, watching. Nora felt the weight of fear settle on her again, but this time, beneath it, a quiet resolve formed. She placed her hand on Rex's back and whispered, "Let them watch. Tomorrow, we fight in the daylight." And as the fog rolled in from the river, the city of Riverside stirred. Not in peace, but in warning. The storm rolled in with the hour, the kind of rain that bent power lines and made the harbor smell of salt and smoke. Lightning flashed across Riverside's skyline, illuminating the old warehouse like a wounded giant waiting to be avenged. Nora Hayes stood beneath the dripping eaves, her coat soaked, her pulse a drumbeat in the quiet between thunder. Inside, the trap was ready. Detective Samuel Grant moved methodically through the shadows, double-checking the equipment. His hands, rough and scarred from years on the force, handled each motion sensor with care. He wasn't a man of many words, but when he spoke, people listened. "Infrared cameras are live, motion detectors armed. No one gets in or out without us knowing." His voice carried the confidence of experience, but also a fatigue buried deep. He had lost too many cases to greed and fear. And this one felt like redemption. Across the room, Dr. Camila Alvarez adjusted the tablet linked to the cameras. She wore a dark turtleneck beneath her raincoat, her silver hair damp from the storm. Her sharp, perceptive eyes flickered between screens. 3 entrances, all covered. If they come, they'll walk straight into the corridor. She spoke calmly, the composure of a scientist who'd traded excavation sites for crime scenes. Nora watched them work, her heart split between fear and purpose. Eli slept upstairs in a makeshift nursery she'd set up in her apartment, guarded by 2 uniformed officers. Rex remained by her side, his ears twitching at every creak of the old building. The German shepherd's amber eyes glowed faintly in the low light, his muscles coiled with silent vigilance. It was close to midnight when Grant checked his watch. "We hold position," he said quietly. "No movement until they bite." They waited. The storm howled, a restless symphony of wind and water. Then, a faint, metallic sound, so soft it could have been the rain, echoed from the far end of the warehouse. Nora froze. Rex's head lifted, ears pointed. Camila looked at the screen. "Camera 4 just picked up movement." On the monitor, 3 shapes slipped through the narrow side door. Their clothes were dark, their movements calculated. One man carried a crowbar. Another had a small handheld light. The third, shorter, broad-shouldered, paused to scan the room like a predator, checking for prey. Grant's voice dropped to a whisper. "Positions. Stay low." Nora crouched behind a stack of crates, her breath shallow. The intruders advanced deeper into the hall, stepping carefully over puddles that shimmered under the flashlight beam. One of them, a tall man with a limp, grumbled under his breath. The light caught his face just long enough for Nora to recognize him. Michael Trent, Victor Hale's personal assistant. He was in his mid-30s, lean with sharp features and a perpetual scowl etched into his narrow face. Once he had been polite, always addressing her as Mrs. Hayes with, fake courtesy. But after Garrett's funeral, his gaze had turned cold, predatory. He was the one who handed her the deed to the $1 inheritance. Now that same man led 2 hired enforcers through her basement like thieves returning to their crime. The second man was Cole Parker, a former dock worker in his 40s with a thick beard and a nose broken more than once. He walked with his shoulders hunched, his right hand never straying far from the metal pipe at his belt. The third was younger, barely 30, a jittery figure named Raymond, with bleached hair and darting eyes, the kind of man who survived by following orders without understanding them. They reached the center of the corridor. Nora could see them clearly now on the monitor. 3 men standing beneath the beam of light, surrounded by the quiet hum of waiting traps. Grant pressed a button on his handheld remote. Lights! Floodlights exploded across the room, blinding white. The intruders froze. The sound of steel reverberated through the air as the heavy doors slammed shut, sealing them inside. Rex barked once, a deep, thunderous sound that rolled through the chamber. "Police!" Grant's voice boomed as uniformed officers burst in through the main entrance. The storm outside masked the chaos within. Shouts, metal scraping, the crash of boots. Michael Trent tried to run, slamming against a locked door. Cole swung his pipe, only to be tackled by 2 officers. Raymond dropped to his knees, muttering curses under his breath. Within moments, it was over. The 3 men were restrained, wrists zip-tied, faces pale under the glare. Nora stepped forward, her eyes fixed on Trent. His lip was bleeding, but his expression carried a smirk that chilled her. "You think this changes anything?" he hissed. "You don't understand who you're dealing with." Grant stepped between them, his voice steady but edged with anger. "Save it for your lawyer." As officers led them out into the rain, Camila leaned over the tablet, her brows knitting. "Grant," she said softly, "before the lights came on, look here." She rewound the footage a few seconds. The camera showed something odd. As Trent entered, he placed a small black device on the wall near the staircase, no bigger than a coin. "A tracker," Grant muttered. "Or a transmitter. Damn it!" He ripped off his gloves, checking the wall. The device blinked once, then went dark. Someone outside had been listening. Nora felt her stomach turn. "Victor?" Grant nodded grimly. "If Trent was still taking orders, Victor knows you set the trap. He'll come harder next time." Camila looked toward Nora, her tone measured but urgent. "We need to move the documents to the museum. If they've been monitoring you, this place isn't safe anymore." Thunder cracked overhead, rattling the windows. Nora glanced down at Rex, who was still growling low, his gaze fixed on the far corner of the basement where the old hatch lay covered once again. The steel door shivered slightly, as if something below had been disturbed by the commotion. "Camila," Nora whispered, "do you hear that?" A faint, rhythmic sound rose from beneath the floor, slow, mechanical, like a deep metallic heartbeat. Rex barked again, stepping closer. Grant frowned, weapon half raised. "What the hell is that?" Camila's voice trembled for the first time that night. "Something old," she said. "Something that's been asleep for decades." The storm roared louder, drowning everything else. But under its echo, the basement exhaled, a sound not of wind, but of awakening. Morning sunlight broke through the fog that had hung over Riverside for days. The courthouse steps glistened from the night's rain, and inside the grand chamber, the hum of murmuring voices faded as the judge entered. Nora Hayes sat quietly on the wooden bench, holding Eli close against her chest. Her hands were trembling slightly, not from fear, but from the weight of everything that had led to this moment. Rex lay at her feet, chin on his paws, amber eyes fixed on her face with the same devotion that had carried them through every storm. The courtroom was packed, journalists scribbling notes, locals whispering in awe. Across the aisle sat Victor Hale and his wife Ava, both immaculate and cold, as if sculpted from ice. Victor's expression remained stoic, but the muscle in his jaw twitched with restrained fury. Ava's painted lips curved in a frozen smile, though her eyes burned with disbelief. Judge Margaret Rowan presided over the case. She was a woman in her early 60s, short and broad-shouldered, her silver hair tied neatly in a bun. Her deep-set eyes held the no-nonsense sharpness of someone who had seen too much deceit to be easily moved by theatrics. She had been on the bench for 30 years, a widow who had once raised 2 children on her own after her husband died in a warehouse fire. That loss had shaped her sense of justice, stern but compassionate toward mothers who fought to survive. Her gavel struck. The court recognizes the Riverside Streetcar Trust as a valid and active fund, she declared, her voice firm and resonant, and the sole legal heir and trustee, as confirmed by historical and genetic evidence, is Mrs. Nora Hayes. Gasps rippled through the courtroom. Victor's lawyer rose, his tie askew and desperation seeping through his polished tone. "Your Honor, surely there must be a—" "There is no must," Judge Rowan interrupted. "Only the law. The trust was intended for the descendants of the original founder, and all documentation supports Mrs. Hayes's claim. Furthermore, the court dismisses the petition for custody of Eli Hayes. The child remains with his mother." Victor slumped back in his seat. Ava reached for his hand, but he pulled away, his composure cracking for the first time. His empire, built on greed and inherited arrogance, had just slipped through his fingers. When Nora left the courthouse, the winter sun shimmered over the harbor. Reporters shouted her name, cameras flashed, but she ignored them all, clutching Eli tighter. The boy looked up, his eyes wide with wonder. "Mama, does that mean we can go home now?" She smiled through tears. "Yes, baby. Home. And something more." Months passed, and spring returned. The abandoned warehouse by the tracks no longer stood as a relic of despair. Under Nora's vision, and with support from Dr. Camila Alvarez and Detective Grant, it transformed into the Riverside Beacon Center, a community hub filled with laughter, light, and second chances. The rusty sign was replaced with a mural of a mother and child standing beneath golden lamps, Rex beside them, like a guardian angel. Inside, the air smelled of coffee, fresh paint, and hope. Single mothers learned trades, welding, sewing, coding, while volunteers offered childcare and legal advice. Nora worked tirelessly, greeting everyone by name. She had shed her grief, but not her humility. The locals began calling her the Lightkeeper of Riverside. Detective Samuel Grant visited often, sometimes with his sleeves rolled up to help repair a window or install a new lock. His gruff demeanor softened around Eli, who followed him everywhere. "Mama," Eli had whispered once, "is he a cowboy?" Nora laughed. Sort of, a city cowboy. Grant had only smiled, saying nothing. Dr. Camila Alvarez became a fixture at the center, too, organizing exhibitions that showcased artifacts salvaged from the old streetcar tunnels. Her work gave the community a sense of history, a reminder that their struggles were built on generations of forgotten labor. One evening, as dusk painted the sky orange and purple, the grand opening of the Riverside Light Park was held. The park, built along the old rail line, glowed with thousands of hanging bulbs strung like constellations over cobblestone paths. Children chased each other under the lights, while Rex barked playfully, tail wagging. Nora stood by the riverbank, watching Eli dance in the glow, his laughter echoing over the water. Mayor Helen Granger, a tall woman in her 50s with auburn hair and a booming laugh, took the stage to dedicate the park. "We owe this renewal," she said, "to one woman's courage, to rebuild not just a building, but belief itself." She gestured toward Nora, who blushed as applause rose around her. Later that night, when the crowds had gone and the lights hummed softly over the empty park, Nora locked the door of the community center. The world outside was peaceful at last. Rex followed her to the entrance, tail brushing her leg. "We did it, boy," she whispered. "We finally brought the light back." Then came a knock at the door. A mail carrier, a young woman with freckles wearing a soaked blue uniform, smiled shyly. "Delivery for Mrs. Hayes." Nora signed, thanked her, and tore open the small brown parcel. Inside was an iron key, cold and ancient, its surface etched with a symbol she recognized immediately: the winged wheel of the Riverside Streetcar Company. A folded note accompanied it, written in elegant handwriting. "There is still one door left beneath the city. Let Rex lead the way." The note was unsigned. Nora stared at it for a long moment, feeling the river wind brush her face. Then she smiled, a quiet, knowing smile that carried both curiosity and courage. She glanced down at Rex, who tilted his head and let out a low, excited bark, as if he understood. "Looks like the city isn't done with us yet," she murmured. And as the lights along the river shimmered like 1,000 tiny suns, Nora Hayes walked home with her son and her loyal companion, her heart lighter than it had been in years and her story far from over. Sometimes miracles don't arrive with thunder or angels. They arrive quietly, in the form of courage, a mother's prayer, or the loyalty of a dog who refuses to leave your side. Nora Hayes' story reminds us that even when the world turns its back, God never does. He works through the ordinary, through rain-soaked nights, through trembling hands rebuilding broken dreams, through every small act of love that lights the darkness. Each of us carries a little riverside inside our hearts, a place once abandoned, waiting for redemption. When we choose kindness, when we forgive, when we keep believing even after everything falls apart, that's when heaven leans closer. That's when light returns. So if you've ever stood in the rain and wondered whether God still sees you, He does. He always does. Sometimes the miracle you're waiting for is already growing in the silence beneath your feet, just waiting for you to dig deep enough to find it. May God bless you, and may His light guide every weary soul still searching for hope. If this story touched your heart, leave a comment to share your thoughts. Subscribe to the channel for more stories of faith and redemption. And share this video to remind someone that miracles still happen, often in the simplest, most human ways. Let there be light, even in the smallest corner of the world, and let it begin with you.